Massive Entertainment are back with a second big movie franchise game in as many years. From the blue majesty of Avatar last year, we turn to the dark side this year with The Force, The Thief, Her Pets and Her Past in this very first open world Star Wars game. Can you believe it? Now, is this a scoundrel to die for? The game touches down across PlayStation 5, Series X, Series S and multiple PC specs for us to dive into. Console first impressions are good, no menu or options, just straight into a pre-rendered video intro, setting up this nerf herder tale. Once into gameplay, the 21:9 cinema scope remains, which I loved. But fear not, as you can revert to a full 16:9 widescreen if you wish, although the view is not really anamorphic, it's just bars that reduce the rendering load, so potentially could improve performance, which it certainly shows up on PC. Below this are options to tweak and disable motion blur, camera and per object independently. Film grain and chromatic aberration can also be toggled on and off, along with dual modes of quality or performance and a third mode exclusive to PS5 and Series X on 120Hz screens, offering choice and customization of the game's presentation. Excellent work here from the team. Now, quality mode targets a 4K output using FSR2 with DRS enabled from a base 1920 by 1080p on both at 30 FPS. We can see it goes up to a native 1440p as a counted high, all reconstructed back to 4K. UI is always 4K across both modes, and PS5 does tend to be lower than Series X though, with some shots being 1920 by 1080 on PS5 versus 2259 by 1271 on Series X. Both machines scale often between these counted bounds though. Image quality is still soft due to the TAA and reconstructed image, but clean and sharp enough most of the time, specifically when you switch between this and the performance mode. The thing is, as seen with the comparisons, the image can be very unstable. It flickers and movement often even when the camera is still, due to the amount of vegetation, fog volumes, light sources, shadows and even shadow and light maps, and those ray tracing effects and denoising filters. It can break down in some areas. Quality mode is better but not free from this, and it can also have bugs where light sources are higher on performance mode than quality and vice versa. Moving into performance mode, it now aims for an approximate 1440p ceiling via FSR2 again, but now hovers around 1707 by 960p range at best. Again, we can see a delta between PS5 and Series X. Both dip as low as 1280 by 720p, often in the open world sections, but sometimes PlayStation 5 is 720p and Series X can be approximately 847p. Lower and higher for both consoles across all modes is always possible. I never counted a native 1080p on both consoles in this performance mode, and this results in a softer and far more fizzled and unstable image. It's never terrible in cutscenes, interiors, etc., but outside with long views, fast motion, sub-pixel alpha in grass, trees and water body reflections, it can look more unstable on a large 4K screen. This cost does bring 60 FPS target now during gameplay on both consoles, so at least the choice is yours to make.
You're an off-worlder, and this ship of yours isn't gonna fly anytime soon. But lucky for you, I'm a mechanic.
Finally, that third quality mode available if you're hooked up to a 120Hz screen. Series X players need to set 120Hz in the operating screen menu, and cutscenes remain at 30 FPS and the high quality no matter the mode, and some incidental ones remain at 60, 40 or 30 depending on the chosen mode. PC can unlock these if you have the power. Quality 30 or 40 are identical aside those resolution related aspects, which is common to most engines from level of detail, FX quality, reflections and such, but the DRS range is on average lower than the 30 FPS mode, with 1080p being far more frequent here for both consoles.
Graham, that for me?
No, but this is.
Ah,
Between modes, reductions are mostly resolution related. A minor reduction in ambient occlusion, global illumination quality and level of detail was noted, along with a tiny reduction in shadows and light sources. Image quality and foliage reduction is the most obvious cost though, aside the hike in performance, with drawing now being far closer to your speeder bike as you travel through the world. Anything resolution related is also impacted, such as the abundant use of SSR and static fallback in cube maps, foliage instability, those ray tracing reflections, grass and drawing range along with rocks are far more blatant in that performance mode. Now Series S has but a single mode, even for 120Hz screens, but all other options remain, being closer to the performance mode of Series X and PS5, but targets 1080p FSR2 now with DRS at a 30 FPS target. 1080p is never hit though, and natively it is often just 1280 by 720 and going to a low of 1129 by 635 as a base resolution, but it can increase to an approximate 1477 by 831p high when in quieter sections, specifically those real-time cutscenes when the bars come in. Now, like the performance mode, it cuts back ambient occlusion slightly more, less grass and foliage, less spotlights and shadow casting light sources, much lower GI quality, which is closer to the low setting on PC, specifically in range and BVH contents and reflection quality, reduced level of detail and view distance, reduced depth of field effects. Post effects generally are reduced, as is SSR resolution, and those fall back to cube map reflections. Now in towns with less grass, alpha and such, it can look okay, but the noisy fallback from Snowdrop's real-time GI can stand out more than the other consoles due to the sparse stochastic sample level and that temporal accumulation filter used within the TAA to clean this up. The photo mode is a nice feature within the game, allowing full time of day to be shown off, but it does show this engine method best, warts and all. Now, starting with performance mode, first, a locked 60 FPS on either console is out of reach. Continuing the resolution counts, we do see slightly better performance on the Series X. In quiet enclosed battles, they both stay close to 60 FPS and the highest resolutions, with only a handful of drop frames or torn frame on the Series X in the top quarter of the screen. PlayStation 5 always remains VSync, so it drops frames fully, and this does help the Series X out, as it can tear at the top section along with full drop frames, which is a partial reason for that slightly better performance. But outside into the open world and riding on a speeder bike, we now see they both drop more frames, but PlayStation 5 can dip more, giving the Series X an approximate 6% lead in this section. Once into the dense areas of towns in Macau and other areas, we clearly become CPU and memory bound. Now we dip into the low to mid 40s on both, with Series X again taking the lead by a larger lead here, circa 12% or 5 or 6 extra frames for your money. Neither feels stable here, and these are the worst areas tested during the opening few hours, so expect performance mode to be faster but inconsistent on both platforms. This does point to a lot of issues within the engine itself, certainly from a CPU perspective and possibly even memory.
Hey, you looking for a way in?
Quality mode is much better. Again, PlayStation 5 is V-synced and Series X can tear, but much less now, and they both stay close to a locked 30 FPS during combat, exploration, and even walking through towns. This is by far the better choice for those that want consistency over simply faster frame rates, but the choice being present is welcome. If you are impacted by erratic frame times during play, this can also be noticed when the game jumps from gameplay into cutscenes as they drop to a 33 millisecond refresh, then this mode is for you, and from my tested sections, caveated, as it could always be worse with sections later in the game, this mode is the one to choose for most. Well, aside those that have a 120Hz screen.
This thing has some kick. Oh, okay, we're alive. We fix the ship, get to the core worlds, and land a big score.
Now, this mode is the best for PS5 and Series X players, hitting the best balance of image quality and performance, with it having sufficient headroom to hit that 25 millisecond frame time needed. As many titles we have covered before, this is the perfect middle ground between 30 and 60 FPS, halving the difference in fact, and it instantly feels much smoother than 30 and is always more consistent than the performance mode, in the current pre-launch review build anyway. It looks almost identical on each in this mode, providing the best cinematic quality, HDR, and most consistent performance of all modes. However, we see more frame pacing issues on PlayStation 5 over Series X in this mode, and the engine achieves the target 40 FPS well, but it often skips between 16, 25 and 33 millisecond frames to achieve that. Effectively, we have bad frame pacing. Now, many of these issues on the PS5 version do point to memory-related aspects and possibly other development challenges from the team. Nonetheless, this remains my recommended mode for all PS5 and Series X players, so long as you have the screen to support it. Series S does a tremendous job, all things considered, in offering a solid 30 FPS rate. Cutscenes run better with less frame pacing than we see on the bigger consoles. GPU-bound sections are better balanced here due to the big cuts, and thus dip and tear less often than Series X and PlayStation 5. Now, the only place it suffers is those CPU/memory-bound town sections that stream in characters, objects, and more. Due to the smaller memory footprint and specifically bandwidth on the S, these can present bigger frame spikes into the 80 millisecond range for a longer and greater frequency. All in all though, it's still a solid performing title, considering it still delivers the lion's share of ray tracing and visual quality that is far better than what you would expect of this little console. All in all, it's a very impressive running title on the Series S, and at times better than the bigger console versions, relatively speaking. Now, PC does highlight the highs and lows of the gaming engine. Even on my RTX 4090 maxed out, we can still become CPU limited at times. 4K DLSS quality max with RTX Di can offer the engine at its best, and it does look gorgeous, but this is demanding and will require DLSS to achieve 60 FPS. The menu option is pretty clean and easy, with a standard Ubisoft level of giving you an example of what some of the changes are, but not every setting does. They are grouped together in the independent categories, starting off with level of detail, reflection quality, and at the bottom, ray tracing quality. On my RX 6800, we can achieve significantly better IQ and performance than both consoles, just not both at the same time, all throughout our play. Using the hangar base shot here, we can see that PlayStation 5 and Series X run most settings closest to high, with ray tracing closest to the medium settings. This is true of all modes. Performance mode does look to reduce the resolution of reflections, a reduction in raycast per rendered pixels to low now, and Series S is closest to the low ray tracing and medium settings, but without more time, I would assume some options are tweaked between low and medium high, such as shadows, GI bouts, and certainly the BVH level, which is definitely low on the Series S. The draw distance is another one, and for example, this can offer a decent level of performance improvement. The performance mode on consoles uses low draw distance and object detail now, with low clutter and grass. It's not a surprise, as we can see a welcome 20% performance gain when moving to these settings from the default high setting, which is 20, 150 and high clutter. Overall, the settings are a mix between high and medium on consoles, with again the Series S and performance mode being slightly lower than this. When aligning as close as possible to the consoles with 4K FSR performance, we can exceed the console resolution using the same quality mode as consoles. A bias set to 4K from a base 1080p low. On this machine though, we cannot lock to 60 FPS, with performance being erratic depending on location. Out in the open landscape, we are more weighted to GPU bound, with dense foliage, fill rate and bandwidth. Frame times could be close to a 40 FPS target lock here, with some dips, but 60 FPS locked is not possible, but it can hit 60 FPS at certain sections. Once into the towns though, the data streaming and memory demands ramp up the pressure on the CPU and the throughput overall, and now we are held back by my Zen 5600X and memory. Here we can struggle to maintain 16 and 33 millisecond frame times, with prolonged periods running into the low 40s, very close to what we see on both Series X and PlayStation 5. This CPU usage is some of the most extreme I've seen in a game for a while, with at times 100% hit on all cores, and this is likely a bug, as changing settings can force this to happen, which actually looks like a shader recompilation issue, and the game is very memory demanding. At 4K FSR2 with ray tracing at medium and settings at high, it will eat anywhere between 8 and 11 gigabytes of system RAM and a similar amount of VRAM, so be aware of the VRAM and system RAM requirements for this game, as it currently is reasonably high. You can also use FSR3 frame generation, but it's still not a guarantee to get a consistent locked 16 millisecond frame time, but it is one option, as is the other, to cap at 40 FPS and get that balanced mode as you see on console.
Not bad. Still in one piece.
As you would expect with the RTX 4090, maxing the game out on this GPU offers up the way the team always intended it to be played. With RTX DI enabled, the enhancements to material quality, self-occlusion, visual impact really does improve the presentation here, specifically within those built-up towns and buildings. DLSS is clearly the best solution here, with 4K DLSS quality, again with a 4K bias, offering up a far more pleasing and stable image than my RX 6800 and any of the consoles. That said, it does still have visual issues on foliage, volumetrics in particular, and other blemishes within the visual makeup not related to the hardware. At these maximum settings though, with DLSS quality, we are often below 60 FPS, and even a performance level can see dips under this. Disabling RTX DI and maxing out ray tracing, we now comfortably hit the 70s in action, but again, out in the open world, we can see some minor dips under 60 FPS. As true on all formats though, even my 5800X 3D becomes the bottleneck within built-up areas, and we can see some minor dips under 60 FPS. Even standing still in the cantina sees CPU and memory demands close to sub 16 millisecond frame times, and my 5600X is way below that threshold even at lower settings. This is still far and away the best place to play the game on, but the demands do outweigh the visual and technical returns somewhat. The Snowdrop engine has been an impressive entry into Ubisoft's bespoke engine technology pool since its debut with The Division. Here in Star Wars Outlaws, they have pushed the consoles hard with a core integration of ray tracing that is both impressive and demanding across all hardware, which includes PC. Here they have raised the engine limits again. Partnering with Nvidia, it certainly can exceed both the visual quality and certainly image quality of all console formats. The main problem is the demands on that are far larger than myself and many would expect. CPU impact and memory is certainly an area that needs some focus, and although never as bad as what we saw with Star Wars Survivor a couple of years ago, the image quality and performance impact on consoles and PC can be disproportionate to the payback on visuals. Series S is the most impressive, with clear cutbacks, reductions and nips and tucks in all places, but it still manages 75% of the quality of all formats. I could not help shake the feeling though that underneath the Lucasfilm facade, the technical roots have not leapt up as much as the hardware it can now run on.
Lots of new friends today.
And that's it for all things technology, Star Wars, PC and console related. Remember, if you like what we do here on IGN Performance Reviews, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.
What? You never make new friends?
I have enough friends.
Yeah, but you don't have to pay me to hang out with you.